Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the stream today. Um, Thank you all for joining us. Let me transition over so I remember to do it, unlike last time. So there we go. We're back. We're back in the Dinos API. I want to get this done. I say that a lot. I have a bunch of ideas in my head. I want to create an MCP with everybody. Um, the other thing I'd really like to do is just turn like Claude loose on the Angular Sudoku as it is and see what Claude thinks about it. Um, get ideas there. Hey, Ole, welcome to the stream, man. Um, Thanks for showing up. Um, why accept Jason? Because you gotta you can't wish me a good morning. You guys need me to fail today so the content's interesting. If I had a good morning and everything went smoothly, there wouldn't be good content. Michael's just helping me out here, man. Anyway, um, looking forward to today. If you guys, anybody new who might be joining, so last night I spoke at a hackathon. It was sponsored by Boeing and True Hacks. Spent about an hour um, talking about what it means to do architecture and what it means to be an architect. Trying to level it to the point of view of people who are in college looking at what the world looks like going forward. Um, so this is kind of all of my drawings and ideas. I didn't I got invited to speak last Sunday. Um, so there wasn't a whole lot of time to really put something very formal together. I didn't have time to put together slides and stuff. So we spent the entire time in Excalidraw just drawing and talking. Um, this is going into my Jason Cringe compilation number 11. Awesome. I'm sure there's tons of cringe. Cringe doesn't bother me as the father of two teenage daughters. Um, I wear cringe as a badge of honor. If you have teenage daughters, one of the most potent tools in your arsenal as a father is cringe. Um, nothing gets my daughters in line better than me threatening to walk them to class in booty shorts. That level of cringe is not something that their teenage brains can comprehend. Um, um, how risky is it to? I saw your comment on Twitter about signal form on production. Wait. Let's go see what Michael is saying. What did I miss? Um, so this is the Angular 2 subreddit. Luckily, I didn't get rickrolled, but I figured I was pretty safe looking at the URL. So how risky is it to start using signal forms in production apps? So Jerome says he's using it currently. Michael says, as someone who's very excited for signal forms and likes the current API, I would not use signal forms in production myself. If I were working solo and making very simple forms and had flexibility to deploy upgrade whenever, maybe, but in my opinion, it's too early. I know some people have tried it in very limited capacities on small teams of people. For all major Angular nerds. Is that kind of a dig at me? I haven't deployed signal forms to production, but I don't think they've committed to anything fully or shipped anything. For perspective, here is the task board. I'm personally waiting until the bare minimum, an RFC, and then accompanying feedback changes. And then Marco says it's not risky, it's fine and dandy. There's some tips. Very cool. So here's the thing, and I like that discussion a lot. And the reason I like that discussion a lot, and let's go back to the browser here, and let's go here. I need you to edit comment as I started to use it so I can have more arguments that it's not my fault. I think Jason does like reactive forms. A secret reactive forms lover in the chat? What? No. We can't have a reactive forms lover here. I rule with an iron fist in my chat. And you guys, if you come to my streams, you have to love template forms. That's just the way it is. We can't have Michael. So you talked about it more here. Let's take a look at more stuff. So I think this is a good discussion. And I really like that this person went to ask the Angular community about it before just pushing his team to do it. I also like Michael's take on it. I got to get my place on PNPM one of these days. It's really nice when I work on Toolkit and other open source stuff. Yeah, PNPM is very nice. You already got me committing to our most recent projects. Yep. But yeah, PNPM is really good. And then here is another comment from Michael. So let's make sure. Take a look at this one too. What am I missing here? This is a wall of text. I'm not gonna make you guys sit here while I read a wall of text. I will tell you, Michael has very reasoned and thought out ways of looking at things. And when you're in a discussion with people like Rainer and Michael, and a lot of the people on the Angular subreddit, you're going to get good information. The subreddit is very well moderated. Highly recommend you guys participate. I try to participate every once in a while. It's a lot to say. I don't want to give my team update fatigue and have to use hacks that are going to be patched right after we update. So I totally agree with what Michael said when in the comment that Ole linked to, and it goes back to man, I've been having this discussion a lot this week, so I keep bringing it up, right? Like it's like when you buy a red car, all of a sudden all you see is red cars. When you have discussions, it's like all you see is echoes of that discussion, but really, it goes back to the values of your team. Is the best way I can put this. When we look at team values and team dynamics, those start to drive what we could call your team morals, right? So what is most important to you and your team is going to drive what you guys what you guys see as morally correct things to do. This is the reason I've been having this discussion a lot is there's an interesting dynamic between the various teams in large organizations. So you'll often have the product team that has their own values. Those values are often in conflict with the engineering team that has their own values. And those are often in conflict with the architectural team that has their own values. The product team may make a decision that seems crazy to the other two teams, but makes a moral sense to them, right? We can call it moral sense because their values align a certain way. It's the same way with the comment that Michael's making. And Michael's expressing it really well. For a small team, your values may be modern Angular, maybe Evergreen, maybe like stuff like that, right? And in that case, where you have a lot of Angular nerds, and you have a desire to build something with the latest and greatest, to be on the cutting edge, and all of the stuff that comes along with that, then absolutely do signal forms, right? You're going to be ahead of the curve, and your software is going to be that much better for it. However, in the case that you're in a large organization and you're trying to avoid things like Michael says, upgrade fatigue and stuff like that, and there are other considerations to take besides, hey, are we just on the latest and greatest of Angular? There's a lot to consider there. I have absolutely run pre-release stuff in prod. At my last company, I helped push zoneless Angular before it was ever, production ready. And there were some bumps that went along with that, but what it gave us was more than, the pain of what we had to do to maintain it. So that's definitely my take on this stuff. Okay, if I get screwed, please give me a job. Ole, if you're ever looking for a job, reach out, man. That's what I'll say. Just message me. We'll talk. This is a completely new feature. The app is legacy, and there's no solid form found solution. So I need to build something, and they want to move fast. I think the API as it is now should be okay for a new app, as long as it is known that there may be some breaking changes. Yeah, you're in a tough situation here, Ole. And the key is that comment you made, right? They need to move fast, or they want to move fast. That's the key that so as engineers and as engineering leaders, and I used to say coders a lot because writing code was the key piece here, but as we move more and more into the LLM and AI area, we need to transition into being engineers and think about things the way engineers think about them. Their desire to move fast is driven by their values. It may not be the best choice here, and that's where I don't know what everything going on, but quite often the desire to move fast is a perceived necessity that may or may not exist. It's important to be aware of that and make sure that we're giving our organizations the best chance to succeed, is the best way I can put that. But yeah, you're in a tough situation. I don't want to provide advice here one way or the other. I think you know your situation better. If you think signal forms will work, I think Michael's giving good advice here. In that, be prepared for the bumps in the road. There's always going to be bumps in the road when you're on cutting edge. There's a reason it's called cutting edge. That's because, yeah, it goes really smooth until it doesn't, and then you pay the price in blood, right? It cuts you. The bleeding edge, the cutting edge. It works both ways, right? At some point, there will be bumps, and your level of preparation will determine how dangerous that is. Would be my suggestion here. 2 years ago, I built a different feature using signals. They were experimental at the time, but it paid off. The code is now up to date with signals. Exactly. Hey, Marcus, welcome to the stream, man. It's good to have you here. there's a different project where they're using reactive forms, and it didn't help because nobody can understand it, what is going on there. That's my biggest issue with reactive forms. I struggle to understand reactive forms, and that could be on me, right? But quite often, when you get big teams building reactive forms, there's usually one or two people that understand the adapters and stuff that people have written for it. And everybody else just kind of copies and pastes, and we cross our fingers and we hope that everything goes well, right? Maybe we sacrifice a few thousand tokens to the AI gods, hoping that the AI gods can help. But we don't know. And I'm sure there are teams out there doing reactive forms amazingly. The hilarious thing to me is I love template forms, but template forms are kind of syntactic sugar on top of reactive forms. But the reason I love template-driven forms over reactive forms is the template is your source of truth about what the form does. And you don't create all of the other stuff that reactive forms have, but you can get access to that stuff through your template form. So a lot of the benefits that people cite of reactive forms you can get through template-driven forms. The other big benefit that I see to template-driven forms is from the dawn of the internet, people were building forms in HTML. And the logic was always in the HTML, and that's what I like about template-driven forms, right? The template is your source of truth. If you need to change something, you change it in the template. That kind of goes against why I like signal forms, but signal forms are also much easier to understand than reactive forms, as far as I'm concerned. And maybe it's just I've taken more time to understand them, but yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and people are always taking bets on pre-release Angular software. I totally agree with that. If they can't understand an existing form solution, then honestly, signal forms would be legit. Yeah, I think getting signal forms in early is going to be a big benefit because it's going to get your teams thinking reactively about your forms. It's going to get your teams thinking in signals. It's going to get your teams thinking in the new solution for forms. So I think there's a benefit there. But I also don't want to minimize the downside of being on the cutting edge. There will be bumps, and so be prepared for those bumps. Yeah, the signal form is pretty good. Yeah, I agree with you, Marcus. The learning curve for reactive forms was quite a bit, I think, and when to use form arrays and whatnot exactly. I like object schema. AI works very easy with that, and as you said, signal form docs was very good. Yep, true. Yeah, I also implemented combo boxes that store only an ID or another plain value rather than the entire object. I like that. So there we go. But yeah, love the discussion. And these are the important discussions that I see modern engineering moving to. Modern engineering is going to be less about the code. I don't think the discussions about code will disappear, but the discussions about code will be more around code structure, code design, code maintainability, and good theoretical code practices. The actual implementation of the code quite often will be done by LLMs and agents anymore, right? And I don't know if I've shared this on stream. I've shared it quite a bit recently, but I have a friend who is in charge of engineering at a company. And we went to lunch, and as we were at lunch, he was telling us that his company is mandating no developer written code. That all code that goes into repos now needs to be written by an agent or an LLM. And if the agent or LLM fails, then the developers need to fix their prompts or their skills files so that the agent or the LLM no longer fails. I have mixed feelings on that. It's an interesting concept, but I think I'm in a wait and see on that one. I told him that every time we go to lunch in the future, I'm going to be asking him about how that's going. So, yeah. I can do that with different forms, but estimates will be different, and they can try and build the same faster. I would like to see it. Yeah. Here's the thing. Regardless of what decision you make, when your company gets to be a certain size, there's always going to be haters for every decision, right? There's always going to be opposition in every decision. And they're always going to say that they can do it faster. I once had somebody who said that they rebuilt an entire project in 2 days. What they failed to mention is that they took the project that they said they rebuilt in 2 days and copied it from our project, took most of our logic and stuff, and rebuilt the UI to be the way they wanted the UI to be. Woohoo, right? Anybody could do that. That's not a big accomplishment. And quite often the people who claim that they can do things faster are piggybacking on everybody else who did all the research to get to the point where they're saying it's been too slow. They're ignoring all the research and everything else that went into it. And they piggyback on that, take all the decisions that were made, take all the code that exists, create their solution in a short amount of time. And they're like, see, that solution didn't work because I was able to go faster. Well, no kidding. You didn't have to make any of the decisions. You didn't, right? You were able to just jump in at a point where we could go fast. And of course you were faster, right? So, you're always going to have haters. That's so busted. Yeah. And yeah, the idea of no human written code going into a repository, I have mixed feelings. I don't want to poison the well on this one. Granted, I'm not talking to them. My feelings on it are LLMs do amazing when there's a structure in place. Agents and LLMs do very amazing when there's a structure in place. They're very, very good at recognizing patterns within that structure and improving upon that structure. Until that structure exists, the notion of no human written code is still kind of a pipe dream. And the way I explain this is, go use an image generating, an image generating LLM, right? And now tell that LLM to generate a creature that only exists in your head, right? The one I like to do, because LLMs mess it up so badly, is I like to tell image generating LLMs, we're going to create an alien that's never been seen. This alien will have like 15 legs. It's going to have an insect-like body. It's going to have feathery wings. It's going to breathe methane. It'll have glowing purple eyes. It'll have dagger-like teeth. It'll be, right? Like, I give it all of this stuff that only exists in my head, but that hasn't been seen anywhere else. And what do we wind up with? Well, we wind up with like a xenomorph that has 15 legs and wings, and right, like LLMs can only take what they've seen and try to apply what you're saying to that. However, if you take like an image to give it the framework to build on top of, and you start saying, this is the core of the alien that I envision in my head. Let's give it a more insectoid feel, or let's give it this or that or whatever. It can start taking that image and start making it look better because it's got a concept of what's there. It's the same with with coding and LLMs there, right? A lot of those LLMs are trained on GitHub. And, we joke about LLMs having the same flaws as humans. Well, of course they do. They're trained entirely on human code, and they're going to generate stuff based on what they've seen before, right? So when you ask an agent or an LLM to generate something that it hasn't seen before, it's going to take something that it has seen before and mutate it in a way that creates these weird hallucinations. However, if you take an LLM and you give it a structure, right, and you start giving it some stuff that it can build on, it's very, very good at taking that and adding stuff to it. Which is why when you watch a lot of the AI and LLM demos, they'll take an existing project and then they'll ask the agent, hey, add this to the project. Hey, change this about the project, right? And it's taken an existing structure and it's doing stuff to it in a way that's faster than humans. And I think that's where the LLM sweet spot is right now. But yeah, hey, Margaret, welcome to the stream. The no human code rule is what you tell investors when you look at engineers and wink. Yeah, and that's the other thing. There's a ton of money in AI. And so, when you listen to like the big CEOs of companies, like OpenAI and like Claude, and they're like, oh, developers will be obsolete in 5 years. And they said that 5 years ago, and they're still saying it now. And maybe it'll be true at some point in the future, but it hasn't been true yet. And it really comes down to a reality of what a large language model is, what a large language model is good at, and what a large language model can do. Maybe we'll crack that barrier, but until we do, if you want to be the most successful you can, you need to give those large language models a framework. And the way I look at what he's talking about, right, they're iterating on the prompts, they're iterating on the skills, and that's good. Right, but that's basically, we've taken our coders and told them to stop writing code, which they do really, really well, thrown them into a new paradigm, and basically told them learn new skills on how to code. Right, it's kind of like I don't know. It's kind of like putting big sensory deprivation gear on a person and telling them to learn how to do something technical, right? Where you can't really feel. It's kind of through secondary feedback and things like that you even get an idea of what's going on. Maybe one way that I could potentially see this is like the Mars rover, right? If we were to try to control the Mars rover right now, it would feel very, very weird to us because any inputs we make on Earth take, what is it, like 8 minutes to reach Mars? And then any feedback takes 8, so it's like a 16-minute round trip. Is that what it is at the speed? I don't remember. But there's such a dramatic delay between your inputs and what happens that you're very disjointed from the rover, right? That's kind of the way I look at what we're trying to do here. I could go and make changes to the code very, very rapidly, but instead I'm trying to use a feedback loop that could take longer. Maybe there will be a payoff in the future, and that's why I'm not trying to poison the well and why I'm trying to get feedback from my friend, because my thoughts here could change very, very rapidly. But with what I know now and what I've experienced now, those are my current thoughts, right? But yeah. These kinds of discussions are very, very interesting to me, and they're what the industry is talking about right now. And so if you guys are having these discussions at work, you're caught up with everybody else. If you guys are trying to figure out where AI fits within your flows, if you're trying to figure out how to make AI better, you're right there with everybody else. Everybody is experimenting with this kind of stuff. I don't think anybody has a solution yet. But yeah. So Frozen Dango, welcome to the stream, and you'll still need someone who knows how to fix the badly drawn hands equivalent of code. 100%, right? Um, I don't know. If you guys watch Al Jokes, you'll get this reference. If you don't, his humor is an acquired taste. I really enjoy his shorts, um, but there's a condition called polydactyly, and polydactyly just means that somebody was born with extra fingers. It's no big deal. And sometimes they fix it surgically. Sometimes it's just like, yeah, it's not going to cause them problems. There's no issue, right? There's no reason to surgically remove extra fingers. It just really depends, right? And the joke was parents having babies in 2026, and the kid was born with 6 fingers. And as Al is playing the mom and the father, they're like, "That's an AI baby. You don't think I recognize AI?" And the doctor's like, "No, it's polydactyly. It's very normal. It's something that we know how to handle." And they're like, "No, you made an AI baby. Why do we have an AI baby?" Right? You made me think of that joke. But yeah, the badly drawn hands, the poorly done eyes, the skin that falls into that uncanny valley when you generate images, right? And it's the same way with the code we generate, right? The poorly handled, the poorly handled security, the fact that things look beautiful but buttons don't work. There's just all those little uncanny things where the code looks really, really good until you look too close, and then you're in that uncanny valley. Will it improve? I sure hope so, because we're dumping like billions of dollars into this, right? Just the sheer amount of money that's going into AI is crazy. If things don't improve, I think that's an indictment of the system. The system's broken at that point. If we can dump so much money and things don't get better, and we don't have the recognition in place to say, okay, we've done enough, let's stop and let's figure something else out, right? It'll be interesting to see which way we go. Yeah, I do want to make sure that I end today on time. My oldest is competing in Las Vegas right now, and so I am a single parent this weekend. I shouldn't say that. That minimizes what single parents do. I'm not watching her. She's old enough to take care of herself. I'm at home with my youngest, and I want to make sure that I end on time so that we've got some plans this afternoon that I want to make sure that we can take care of. So if you guys see me glancing at my watch, or you see me glancing at the time or whatever, that's why I need to end on time today, so that I can be a decent dad, and make sure that my daughter is taken care of today. But yeah, I love these discussions about AI. I love these discussions about framework usage. I love these discussions about things like that. I had an opportunity to talk to a member of the Angular team this week. I went to NG Enterprise. It's something that I've been lucky to be able to attend, where Google invites like the large enterprises out there using Angular to come talk to Google about Angular. And in one of the discussions we were having, in one of the discussions that I had with a member of the team, and I don't want to say their name or quote them directly, but the discussion headed heavily into AI. And one of the interesting points they brought up is if you go to any LLM, you can vibe code a React app pretty quickly. And it will be pretty good, right? If you go to any LLM and you ask it to vibe code an Angular app, you're going to get mixed results depending on skills and things like that. And so the question they have to ask themselves is, in this reality, why should Angular exist? And I think that's an important question that we should be asking ourselves. Not why should Angular exist, but in the processes that we're implementing at work or in other parts of our life, specifically related to coding and engineering, with the reality of what LLMs can do, should I be doing what I'm doing? Why should what I'm doing exist? Why does it matter? And if we can't answer that question, it's an important thing to look at. The flip side of that coin is that you've got a lot of organizations that are like, if you're not doing AI, then you're failing and you need to be doing AI. And so you have a whole bunch of people creating a whole bunch of AI. But is the AI that they're creating worth the tokens that we spend to create it? Or is it worth the tokens that we spend to maintain it and things like that? So, there's kind of two flip sides to that coin, right? Like, should we exist? But if we exist, should we really be investing tokens in things that maybe a linter can do? Should we be investing things that maybe like a generator can do and things like that? And so those are interesting questions for us to delve into also. There's an interesting use custom service versus signal store. Custom service versus signal store. Man, I've had this argument so many times. Here's the short version of the argument every single time. Custom services are in your control. That's their benefit. The downside to a custom service is to make custom services useful, you either create your own framework that makes custom services useful, and every service you create that's a custom service derives from your custom framework. So now you're teaching people to use a framework that you now have to maintain. Or there's a ton of boilerplate in every custom service, and it becomes an expensive piece to maintain. And if you need to make changes, now you're making that change to every custom service that you've created. On the other hand, Signal Store is maintained by a team. Signal Store is tested by tons of Angular projects. Signal Store does all the stuff that you're going to put into your custom service, right? So as far as I'm concerned, whatever a good state management system that doesn't add a ton of overhead is always better than a custom injectable service at a certain scope, right? In a small project, custom services are perfectly fine. But as soon as you need multiple teams and things like that to start maintaining it, custom services are always, well, they're most likely going to lead to pain and heartache, or you developing your own platform that is really a competitor to, signal stores or whatever else is out there. But you don't do it as well as they do it because you aren't in the business of writing platforms. You're in the business of delivering software. And whenever you make shortcuts, you always make shortcuts on your platform because you need to deliver the features. That's, yeah. And as usual, I never saw a good custom service solution from people who say that. 100% Ole. I have heard of great custom services, but the issue is I can't see them. Yep. And everyone probably has more variants. Exactly, Michael. So, this is the important thing about when we move from being coders to engineers. An engineer looks at the bigger picture. An engineer has influence to be able to influence others to see things the way they do. Coders can pick apart coding solutions all day, right? And they're going to prefer their coding solution. but that doesn't make it right. And it doesn't make it right for what you're trying to solve at that point in time. That's the way I look at it. My friend's project, they don't allow using Signal Store, even though the whole team would like to use it. At the same time, they don't provide any alternative solution, and the code is very painful. It's a mess. 100%. And that's the problem, right? So I worked with somebody who hated NGRX. And their hatred for NGRX bled into anything that had the NGRX name on it, right? I think one of the biggest problems that Signal Store has is that NGRX name scoping on the NPM package. Signal Store isn't really NGRX. It just happens to come from the NGRX team, so it has the NGRX scoping. But there are a lot of haters out there that absolutely hate NGRX. And maybe, you know, they got burned by it, but they were probably trying to use it for something that NGRX wasn't good for. And rather than recognizing that, hey, I screwed up, I made a bad choice, they instead blame it on the NGRX team. And, you know, it led to some very dark times for the maintainers of NGRX. Component Store and Signal Store are not NGRX. They come from the NGRX team who understands state, and they're very, very good. But they are not NGRX with action. You know, they're not Redux, right? And so you wind up with these weird pockets where it's like, you can't use Signal Store, but we're not going to give you a good solution, right? 100% what you're saying, Ola. The project is small and new, but it feels like a 10-year-old legacy project built with AngularJS. Oh, that's the other. One of the best things you can do for yourself as you work in our field, don't become complacent. Never lose that spark of curiosity. Never lose that desire to ask why. Once you do that, you become exactly what Ole is describing here. Once you settle into a technology, once you settle into a way of doing things, once you decide that your way of doing things is the best way to do them, eventually you're going to be that person who's creating 15-year-old code in a modern framework, but not utilizing the framework to its full potential. And nobody ever intends to get there, but many people do, and it's tough. Because typically by the time you get to that point, you're in a position of leadership, so you cause more damage, right? Because your blast radius is bigger. So never lose that desire to learn, never lose that creativity, never get to a point where you think that you're correct all the time, right? I say this quite often, but if I walk into a room and I look around the room and say I'm the smartest person in the room, I'm in the wrong room, right? I don't want to be the smartest person in the room because I want to learn stuff. But if I walk into a room and I think I'm the smartest person in the room, the reason I'm in the wrong room is that I'm not in a position where I'm willing to listen to others, and I probably shouldn't be there. If I can walk into a room and be like, yeah, I'm going to learn something here, I feel like I'm in a good place. This is how I personally view the world. And I think it's beneficial because there have been a lot of times where I've decided that, you know, I'm correct. And over the course of discussion, I've tempered what I believe, right? There have been a lot of times where, yeah, it's proven out that I am correct. But there have also been a lot of times where I'm like, no, I need to make changes to what we're doing. And being willing to recognize that is an important part. Hey man, nice bread. Uh, the lead says signal store is overhead, but when you see the code, my friend experiences cognitive dissonance, asking for a friend. Oh, beard. Thanks. Appreciate that. I've been working on it for a while. Um, it's changed slightly because my oldest doctor is studying to, or my oldest daughter is studying to be a nurse right now. Um, and they're going through their hospice piece of her CNA training. And in the U.S., a CNA is a certified nursing assistant. It's kind of the lowest level of a certified nurse. And then from there, more schooling and more experience gets you into the higher levels of nursing. My daughter wants to be a pediatric nurse, and it requires a full degree and stuff like that to get there. But to get there, she has to be a CNA. Anyway, um, part of the hospice thing is she needed to shave a man. um, and so she asked me if she could shave my beard. So the shaping and stuff right now is due to her. And she usually has a better eye for clothing and stuff than I do. So yeah. But yeah, the lead. So I don't know how you guys have a team lead or similar here in Italy. Just hire like one or two devs and just throw them on a project. I'm a solo front end dev on two projects now. I can do whatever I want. And so you're talking about like smaller startups, right? When you get into larger corporations and stuff, there has to be team leads and stuff like that. There has to be somebody who attends the meetings so everybody else can write code. It's the way I tend to look at it. But the other part of their job is just making sure that the team understands what's going on and stuff, right? Um, when we're not joking, that's the reality. But to answer your question, Ole, um, there's an interesting dichotomy between when you look at React and when you look at Angular. Um, and the dichotomy that I'm speaking about specifically is the willingness to embrace outside packages. Um, React is a library, and they'll tell you they're a library. And because they're a library, you have to bring in packages. So the React community embraces new packages very, very well. The Angular community, on the other hand, Angular is a framework, and the Angular community becomes very, very insular. And as you talk to like people in the open source part of Angular, one of their biggest frustrations is the people who tell you that Angular is a complete framework and that you don't need to add anything to Angular. And that's bullshit is the way I'm going to put it. Angular provides the tools to build things, but if Angular was a complete framework, then we could build anything with Angular and just by putting things together. That's not the way it works. That's why NGRX exists. That's why there's a whole bunch of other libraries out there that exist because of this, right? The NGRX extensions extend NGRX because NGRX in and of itself can't be a complete platform, right? It frustrates me because the argument that it's overhead. Well, you know what else is overhead? A service that's injected at runtime. So the whole DI system is overhead, right? You know what else is overhead? Routing. So the whole routing system is overhead. It's just, it's shifting the goalposts is really what it is, right? It's them saying my solution is best, so I need to shift the goalposts to make your solution look worse. So yeah. Exactly, Michael. If I was in your spot, I would make 3 signal stores of the worst services and be like, check this out. Yeah, the biggest problem that you're going to have when you don't introduce something like Signal Store or a library that helps you manage state, is that at some point the teams are going to get big enough, and things are going to get big enough that Team A is building services a certain way, Team B is building services a certain way, and Team C is building services a certain way. And at some point, we drift so far apart that maybe Team A can't communicate with Team B and C anymore. Their services just don't work the same way. And so Team A's services can't be injected into Team B's components without Team B creating some sort of adapter that makes their services work in Team B's components. Same with teams, right? Like you wind up writing this layer on top. Well, you know what that layer is? That layer is Signal Store. That layer is Component Store. That layer is NGRX extensions, right? So instead of you spending the time to create and maintain these layers and services and all of this crap, why don't you take the time to bring in the library and then take all that time that you saved to focus on delivering features? Maybe. Business logic? Maybe. Right? Stop working on platform level stuff that exists out there and instead focus on what you're supposed to be building. That's the way I look at it. And when you want to talk about overhead, even if you want to talk about like performance overhead or anything like that, adding Signal Store is never going to account for more time unless you do something completely stupid, right? It will never account for more time than a network round trip ever, right? That's just not, it's not possible. Network round trips are an eternity compared to the amount of milliseconds that you're probably going to adding a Signal Store. The argument just doesn't stand up. And when you're talking about things like consistency, when you're talking about things like shared understanding, when you're talking about things like bringing new developers in to understand your architecture, right? How many developers out there, engineers out there understand Signal Store? How many engineers could you bring in from an outside company and give them a Signal Store solution and they would be comfortable with it? Now think about your in-house custom services solution. How easy is it for somebody outside to work with your custom services solution? How easy is it for somebody to learn that, right? There's a bunch of benefits that the overhead straw man, right? We're moving the goalposts here to make it so that, you know, my solution looks best, but we're ignoring all of the skeletons that we had to bury, you know, to make my solution look so good. That's the way I like it, or that's the way I look at it. You know what else is overheard? Caring about projects when they will be done over and dusted in like 2 years and you will be unemployed. Some projects are like this, not gonna lie. Oh man. Yeah, you're not wrong. Um, there are a lot of times that teams will build up um, a massive like team to build something quickly, get it out the door, and then cut most of the team that helped them be successful, right? That is a reality. I can't argue against that. And I'll be honest, when you're talking to people when they aren't speaking publicly, it's not AI that's taking people's jobs. AI really isn't doing that. And in fact, in a lot of cases where they've cut people to replace them with AI, they wind up hiring people back to be able to do the work that they thought the AI could do. There, go look it up. You'll see a bunch of companies that cut a whole bunch of their workforce and then secretly hired them back because the AI couldn't do the work. What's really happening when you talk to people behind the scenes is exactly what you're talking about, Obradores. Um, you are, companies have overhired. But if you if you go have layoffs, that's negative publicity, right? You don't want that. You don't want to show up in the news. However, it seems to be there's this easy button where you can just hit it and say, yeah, I'm getting rid of a whole bunch of developers because of AI. Boom. Nobody looks twice. Everybody's like, stupid AI. I hate AI, right? But the reality is they're just hiding layoffs behind AI. That's the way things are right now. And you point to that really, really well. And it's the reality. There's a lot of companies that just have too many developers. And when they want to have layoffs, it's just easier to say AI did it. Right? We're downsizing our workforce because AI, right? When really reality, we just have too many people. We don't want to say that we had a layoff, instead AI. Frozen Dango, even the latency from the computer to the Wi-Fi router is probably higher than most things that don't touch any network at all. You're 100% correct, right? And when we're talking about like browser, when we're talking about the browser, we touch the network all the time. So yeah, you're 100% correct there. Sorry to seem like a doomer, but like some projects are like over in a year or similar. Yeah, you're not wrong. Especially in government projects where there's specific steps like wave 1, 2, or 3. And the nice thing about government projects, at least in the US, is you're typically involved with the union. And so you get a little bit of protection there. It's not about worrying about your job. It's the simple things that usually take 15 minutes and end up taking 2 to 3 hours. Yep. Weirdly enough, I like the situation. I think people firing because of AI is just a good thing for our industry. That's an interesting take. I'd like to hear a bit more about that. I could see an angle there, but very interesting take. There are way too many useless devs in our ecosystem, in my opinion, juniors who can't do basic stuff. And in the end, there are just way too many people, and you can't really skyrocket your productivity with AI. I see that piece, and that's interesting. But here's the thing. At some point, I was a junior who couldn't do the most basic stuff. I was a junior who had to ask questions on everything. What we do when we start cutting out juniors is we shrink the pool of seniors. And so there's an interesting situation where companies are begging for experienced engineers to come work for them, because that pool is continuously shrinking, but we're not investing in the juniors and the mid-levels who are going to become the seniors that they could hire. So while I agree, you could probably do things faster without the juniors. If you cut out the juniors, you're cutting off your lifeline, and you're cutting off that pipeline of people who are going to be the future seniors. And that weakens your company's position long-term, because now you're forced to compete with other people for a continuously shrinking pool of seniors, which means you're paying more for talent. Your cycle time is higher because, or your churn is higher, right? You're constantly hiring new devs because one of your competitors can snipe one of your seniors with a better offer, right? Like that pool is just continuously shrinking. And so, yeah, I understand where you're coming from, but I also think that juniors are very, very interesting. Yeah, capitalism does not think more than 4 quarters ahead. Yeah. Um, we're on point sniping you today. I know. I've been looking at this error message. I keep looking at this error message, and I'm like, dude, I want to fix this error message. But here's the thing. I appreciate the snipes. And the reason I appreciate the snipes is my stream, we stream Angular. We talk about Angular, and Angular is, the Angular is near and dear to my heart. But my stream isn't really focused on Angular. My stream is focused on helping you guys navigate the world of professional development, right? I earned every single one of the gray hairs that I have, right? Lots of stress, lots of late nights, lots of, all of that stuff that got me to the point of where I am. I feel like I can share with you guys and help you guys get a leg up, and hopefully not get quite as many bumps and bruises as I got because I made so many mistakes. I've made so many mistakes over the course of my career and learned so many things from those mistakes. But at the same time, I like being sniped, right? It's completely normal what's happening. Yeah, the gap between juniors and seniors is such a big gap. Well, and it's always been that way, Obradores, right? If we go back and we look at what I was drawing here, this piece here on, this is how you level up. Like the gap between here and here is pretty big. The gap between a junior and a mid-level is pretty big. And what do I mean by that? Well, when you're a junior engineer, really all I expect out of you is to be a sponge. I just want you to come in and learn as much as possible. Learn your framework, learn your language, learn your theory, learn all of that stuff, right? That you were supposed to pick up in college, but let's be honest, you're not going to pick it up until you're actually doing it. So as a junior developer, the amount that I expect out of you isn't a lot outside of learning. Once you move into a mid-level, now I expect you to be able to take like a Jira ticket or something and complete it, right? And so the difference between here and here is pretty big. Once we move from mid-level to senior, now I expect you to be able to not only complete tickets, but to think about those tickets and also help these two levels complete their tickets, right? So the difference between here and here is not only technical, but it's leadership, it's influence. There's a whole bunch that a senior needs that a junior doesn't even think about. So that gap has always been huge. And that's why, most junior devs are like, how do I become senior? Well, the best thing you can do is learn really, really well, become a mid-level, and then people will tell you you're a mid-level, and then eventually they'll promote you to mid-level. Then as a mid-level, your job is to basically become a senior. But even the difference between a senior and a team lead is not necessarily technical. The difference between a senior and a team lead is your soft skills. So as you move from mid-level to senior, it's all soft skills. As you move from senior to team lead, it's even more soft skills, right? There's obviously the strong technical background. There's obviously that desire to learn. There's obviously all of the stuff that we expect from these levels. Plus, we expect you to be able to lead a team. We expect you to be able to help your team meet deadlines, right? This is stuff we don't teach, right? And this is why a lot of team leads fail, because they're really, really good seniors. So we're like, okay, let's make them a team lead. Well, we haven't taught them any leadership. We haven't taught them any of the soft skills they need at this level. And it gets even worse as you move into staff and architecture, where quite often your technical skills are less important than your political, your influential, all of the other soft skills become way more important. So the gulf between here and here is so huge because a junior can't even imagine what an architect's life is like because they haven't experienced all of the leadership that comes from these three levels. But you're not wrong. There's a huge gap. I was a junior too, and I got fired a lot. You know my story. I do know your story. You had a rough story, man, and you overcame, and it's honestly an inspiring story. It would be worth writing like a Medium article about. If you guys don't know Obrador's story, I'm not going to speak for him, but he definitely had some struggles. Some of them are related to him living in Italy. Others are just the reality of what goes on. And he's got a fascinating story. If you guys want to hear his story, you should reach out to him and talk to him about it. I think that the more you go forward, you'll have just juniors lying on their resume and then try to get those mid-senior jobs, and you won't be able to get a job just being honest. That's the way it is. It's the way it always has been. Most of the time when you're interviewing, it's not what you know, it's who you know that's going to help you. Sometimes you get lucky and that's not the case, but a lot of the times it really is just who you know that's going to help you get that leg up to get you in the door. And it's, the amount of lying that goes on in interviewing is crazy. I'll give you a story that I just encountered recently that backs up what you're saying, Abraham. We had a guy that we were interviewing who his resume looked perfect. It met everything we were looking for. On his resume, he specifically called out NX, which I thought, cool. So his resume said that he had helped implement NX at his current company and was instrumental in getting it into the current company. I was like, oh, that's awesome. So I asked him about that point on his resume, and he just gave me a blank stare. And I was like, can you tell me about NX? Well, I don't know what NX is, right? So obviously his resume had been put together by AI based on the job listing. He didn't even know what was in his own resume. And that's fairly common. Everybody lies on their resume. And in fact, one of the pieces of advice that I give people when looking for a new job is to become the used car salesperson of yourself. And what do I mean by that? Well, we enhance the positives, we minimize the negatives, and when people are asking about things that might be negatives, we deflect. And we encourage them to look at our positives. And once all the paperwork's signed and I've got the job, well, then it's perfectly fine, right? For the car to break down right as you drive it off the lot because the paperwork's signed, you agreed to it, blah, 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 right? It's the same with jobs. Enhance your positives and let the negatives come out after the paperwork's signed, right? That's the only way you're going to survive. Capitalism and jobs are about productivity. People want to hire other people so they can be productive. Juniors are really automatically in a very weak position, and that's true. But when we look at the system, and when we look at companies, and it doesn't matter what system that company is in, companies are there to make money. Plain and simple. And companies that make money survive, and companies that don't make money don't survive, right? The different economic systems provide values and ways to look at how that money should be generated and then what happens to that money after it's generated. But the reality is productivity is what everybody's looking for. The different economic systems are ways to try and encourage people to just encourage people to be productive is the way I look at it. And then what do we do with that productivity, right? And that's the way it's always been. It's the way it'll always be. The solution is simple. Be smart, practice a lot, and then sell yourself as a senior, 100%. I calculated that using Signal Store, writing the same feature took 60% less code. That's crazy. That's awesome. And that's because you're not having to work on that library, right? You're not having to create that framework. And that's the thing that a lot of this stuff deals with, right? When you create it on your own, you're refusing to recognize you're creating your own framework. You're creating your own libraries and things like that. And so, 60% less code sounds right. Most seniors these days are just mid-levels or juniors in disguise. For me, for example, I'm not a React or Java dev or whatever. I'm a person with social skills, coding abilities, architectural skills, requirements, analysis skills, maybe even design skills. And if you look at all of those skills you listed, Abra Loris, those are the skills that you're going to need to survive in today's AI and LLM driven world. A lot of the other skills, we can get AIs to do them, right? But understanding architecture, understanding requirements and things like that, that's stuff that comes with time. You know, I'm a bit on the opposite end. I think most of our juniors and mid-levels, we expect too much out of them. Right? Can you imagine, like if we take something that's inherently difficult and inherently dangerous, and we compare it to kind of like what we do, like electrician, right? An electrician who does things improperly could cause fires, could wind up hurting themselves. You know, right? There's like a whole bunch of issues about that. Can you imagine an apprentice electrician being sent and like, hey, rewire this high voltage box? Right? That seems silly. They're usually going to be sent out with somebody who's going to show them how to do it, teach them this is how to be safe, teach them, you know, these are the procedures and all of that stuff. That's not the way we work. When we bring in a junior dev, we expect that junior dev to be able to produce at a mid-level or senior level. So we're like, hey, take this JIRA ticket and fix it, right? And that junior dev struggles. But the reality is they haven't been given that training to be successful. And, you know, I intentionally picked electrician because it's dangerous, right? I'm not saying that writing code is dangerous, but what I am saying is that when you take somebody who's brand new to a job and you throw them at something and say, go do it, of course they're going to struggle, right? And it's the same with mid-level. Expecting senior level work out of a mid-level, well, they aren't seniors, right? The way I look at it is more companies trying to compress salaries, right? If I can get senior work out of a junior or mid-level, well, I'm paying a junior salary and I can keep them as a junior until I deem them worthy of being mid-level or senior, right? But I'm getting senior level work out of them. I'm saving money on that salary. Same with mid-level. And that's why I think we do it. And it really is a difficult system to be a junior and mid-level in, because you're expected to operate at this level, but you just don't have the skills or the experience to do that. And, you know, most seniors are just mid-levels or juniors in disguise. You're 100% correct. Because to be able to be paid for the work that we're doing, we have to say, yeah, this is what I am. Even though my skills may only land me here or here, you're going to ask me to do this kind of work anyway. I may as well get paid to do that kind of work, right? And the pool is ever shrinking. So even if I'm a poor senior developer, because the pool is so small, you're still going to hire me as a senior because there's not a lot of choices. And so you're not wrong. Also, AI was able to generate very fast, similar CRUD features. Yeah. Just routine work. The difference between me and my team lead is that his social skills are pretty good and he just spends time in meetings. I don't like meetings, so I have no desire to be a team leader. And that's really, like, the number of meetings you attend as you go from senior to team lead to architect goes up almost exponentially. I was talking to somebody that I work with, and, you know, he told me that, you know, his schedule only allows about 5 hours outside of meetings for him to do anything. So his time is very, very precious. I'm close to the same. I have very few hours during the week where I'm not in meetings at this level. And so it becomes much more difficult to attend, to be successful. And if you don't want to spend a ton of time in meetings, often going this route is not the right way to go. And Ola, the other thing is, with the skills and stuff out there, Signal Store, And there's so much signal store out there. I totally agree with what you're saying. It just doesn't make sense to roll your own. How do you also communicate your issues in the project? How do you communicate your code issues with non-technical people and try to give them a deadline, not even knowing the main issue in the code in the first place? And that's why, you know, leadership needs technical skills. The other reason you need technical skills is so that you know when the engineers are trying to bullshit you, right? But there, you know, there's you're totally correct. I could go on forever. The first few libraries I used were maintained by Italians, so I thought Italians had the Illuminati of Angular. That's awesome. NX mentioned, absolutely, Marcus. I think it is a good thing that we are hard on juniors. That is the only way to learn. Also, I agree with your money saving thing. That is happening a lot in Italy. It happens a lot everywhere. And juniors need to learn, but at the same time, if we're too harsh on them, we're going to push them out of the industry. We're going to burn them out before they become truly successful. And I think that's a travesty. I look at some of the stuff you said when you were going through this struggle, and that's driven a lot of my thought on this. I used to be very much in agreement with what you just said, Obradores. But as you were going through your struggles, and I don't want to share that information here, but your struggles took you to some places that really made me think about, oh, are we being too hard on juniors? Are we being too hard on mid-levels? Is their life so difficult that this path to senior is nearly impossible? Are we weeding out too many people who would be amazing seniors or team leads or architects just because we're expecting so much and just grinding them down? So a lot of where I am now is honestly fed by what you said. Equal pay for equal rights. Yeah. I don't disagree with that at all. If people are not hard on juniors, then you will end up like most Java devs today. They have 5 years of experience and they can't do anything else. They never changed jobs. They stagnated in the same job. Well, so I want to. There are two kinds of people who write code, right? There's what I call the coders, the 9-to-5ers, and they're the ones who tend to stagnate. And that's okay. We need the people who can just churn out code from 9 to 5, and then they go home and they turn off their brain, and who cares, right? We absolutely need them because there's so much code to be churned out, and who cares, right? There's the other people who never lose that spark of interest, who never lose that curiosity, who are constantly driving things forward. And they're often at odds with each other because the people who, and I don't want to say stagnated, but the people who are comfortable where they are, and the people who want to work from 9 to 5, it's not in their best interest to have things change, right? Because when things change, that's extra work that they have to do that gets in the way of what they do for their job, which is write code, right? So there's a reason for them to not want to change. They just want to write code. They just want to do what they do for 9 to 5 every day, and then they want to go home and they want to enjoy their life. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's the other people who want to push things forward, and to them, staying stagnant, like you said, is painful, right? And we need a mix of both. Without a mix of both, then the company either stagnates or it cuts itself so many times on the bleeding edge that it can't be successful, right? So we need a mix of both. They're both important. And I don't necessarily think it's whether you're tough on people or whether you coddle them. I just think it's the way people are. People have different values, right? Some people value their time away from work. And that's perfectly okay. That's their values. That's what they want to do. And work just funds what they do outside of work. Other people, their career is their identity, right? And who they are is highly driven by their career. And that's perfectly fine too. That's their value. That's who they want to be. And those two groups are always going to be odds. And that tension is necessary because it helps keep things healthy, right? And so like I see what you're saying, and by the way you're saying it, you obviously identify yourself as one of those two groups, right? Um, but I don't think that the answer is to be harder on juniors. What it's going to do is just burn out juniors and mid levels. The answer is to allow people to be who they're going to be, and then come up with the appropriate mix for what you're trying to accomplish, right? If you're trying to build cutting edge technology, you probably need more of those people who are curious and want to change the world. If what you're trying to do is build a large enterprise application that, you know, is stable and has been stable for the past 50 years, you probably want a larger mix of the people who just want to come in, write code, and go home. Um, and there's nothing wrong with, you know, adjusting that mix, or right, it's the reality of the world is the way I look at it. um, they'll get obliterated in the job market sometimes. I've seen that happen. Tech is a hyper competitive field. It is hyper competitive. Totally agree with that. One of the most competitives, agree. No, the market doesn't need them anymore. With AI, they will get obliterated. They will not have jobs anymore, and they will just have one dev like me do all their work. And that's entirely possible. I'm not, right. Like, I don't know where things are going. There will always need to be somebody who's watching the AI. Like, the way I look at it is, the code we wrote 10 years ago is different than the code we write today, and the code we write in 10 years from today will probably be AI prompts, right? That will probably be the most of the code that we write. Very few people will actually be getting down to bare bones. I look at it very similar to, you know, the evolution from like punch cards to machine language, to high order languages, right? Almost nobody today writes machine level language. There are people out there that can, and they're highly sought after when, you know, in compilers or things where you know, optimization matters. Those are where those people really shine. But when you look at the field, most of the people today write in high level languages, right? We write in TypeScript, which is a language put on top of ECMAScript, right? So even the language we write is a simplified version of JavaScript or ECMAScript, right? But none of us are writing machine code. Well, maybe very few of us are writing machine code. And I personally don't write machine code. Could I write machine code? Maybe. It's been a long time since I've looked at the opcodes and things like that. And my understanding of assembly and machine code is way out of date. I could write machine code for like processors 20 years ago if I had to. But today's processors, who knows? So that's the way I look at it. I totally agree with this statement. I think that weirdly enough, this field is going more elitist than ever. And if you're not top psycho guy, like me, you can have a lot of opportunities everywhere as long as you can tell a story. And it's interesting because when you look at AI, the language of AI was Python. And if you wanted to work in AI, you worked in Python, right? TypeScript is rapidly becoming one of the more popular languages for AI. And that's got the Python elitists angry, right? And that's one of the things that I like to take inventory of myself. And you guys have sniped me to death today. This is awesome. But I like to take inventory of myself. Because there have been times in my career where I've been a gatekeeper, where I've been that elitist person that you're talking about, where I'm like, if you can't do this, then you're not good, right? You can't be a part of this industry. And that's absolutely the wrong way to think about it. And that's really just me being a gatekeeper saying, I only think these types of people should work in my industry. And it's a bad way to be. Um, we need multiple points of view to be able to provide the best solutions. Um, so instead, I like to take inventory of myself. And if I feel like I'm being elitist, I like to figure out what can I do to improve my need to feel elitist here. Um, am I perfect at it? Absolutely not. I still have elitist tendencies. Um, but I try to take inventory of myself regularly so that the number of elitist tendencies that I have, I at least want to believe that they're going down. Um, and I think that's a healthy way, just in general, to look at the world and to treat others. Um, the reality is, as I get older, I want more and more. I want more and more, not charity or compassion, but something along those lines, where I want people to look at me less and less strictly, and acknowledge that I'm flawed and I have mistakes. But I also want to give people that same look at people through that same lens. Um, it's not to say that your point of view is wrong, Obradores. It's just that my point of view has changed over the years. I think early on in your career, you need that passion. That passion is what's going to drive you and get you through the difficult times. But yeah, people are people, 100%. Wild Woolly Llama. I totally agree with people are people. And most people want to do the best they can. That's the reality. I don't know anybody personally who wakes up in the morning and is just like, you know what? I'm going to do the worst job I can today. Nobody ever wants to do that. Everybody wants to do the best they can. Um, I believe that about people, and I think it bears itself right. It bears itself out. Homer Simpson. Even the interesting thing about like it about Homer Simpson is, and this is a funny like tangent, right? Like Homer Simpson is like the epitome of incompetence when you look at him in general, right? Um, but there is that episode where Homer realizes he's going to be working in the nuclear power plant forever, right? Um, and he's got that picture of Maggie. That he's changed the sign. It's an oppressive sign. I mean, he's got a picture of Maggie hanging above it, and he's changed it to redo it for her, right? I don't think Homer wants to do a bad job. I think Homer's in a tough situation, and that's the way I look at most people, right? I don't think most people want to do a bad job. I think that quite often we just wind up in these tough situations, um, and we do the best with what we can. Um, I just I don't know. Maybe I'm too much of an optimist, but I really believe that everybody gets a bit of fulfillment out of their job. And if I believe that, then that tells me that people are going to try to do the best at their job because they want to receive the most fulfillment that they can. Um, there's something that I admire when I see people, which is persistence. You try every single day to learn and to make things better. Those days, tech has been sold as an easy field to get into and a very comfortable field. Yeah, and I agree with you. The human spirit and our persistence as a species is something to be admired. Um, humans humans tend to persist through stuff that, like, the um, living in Utah. There was a story in the news a while ago, um, about a guy who was hiking in southern Utah and got trapped under a boulder and spent, I think it was like 127 hours under the boulder. And at some point in time, decided to remove his own arm so he could survive. Right? Like, those kind of crazy stories tell us about, the human condition and the human spirit. And it's why I believe that humans overcome so much, is we just have that drive and that need to persist and to overcome. And I look at everybody that way in our day-to-day jobs, right? Sure, I get frustrated with people who don't think like me all the time. Uh, you know, my daughters will tell you that I am an expert at swearing at bad drivers, um, right? As an example. But do I think they're really out to get me? No. Am I angry in that moment? Absolutely. But you know, when we back up and we look at it, most people just want to get to where they're getting, and they don't even really care about the people around them. Um, and whether that's good or bad, who knows? We could have that argument another day. But in general, I agree with you, Abrelores. Humans in general are amazing creatures. It's fascinating when you take a single human. Most humans have good intentions, right? There are certain humans that don't, and that's a reality. But most humans have good intentions. It's when you create groups of humans and that group wants to survive that you tend to get weird outcomes. Um, so I tend to like to look at people as individuals and less as groups, but you know that's also not realistic in a lot of situations. But yeah, thank you guys for the for the comments and stuff today. It's been a lot of fun. I do want to take a look at this error. Um, that is not what I'm looking for. Where did it go? There it is. This error, right? So let's see if we can get this fixed. So we're trying to inject something that's not called from a constructor, right? And we could probably find where we're doing it by clicking here. Let's see. That's not going to help us. That's just where the error is being thrown. But we can figure it out, right? We're trying to inject the Dynos CRUD service, and it's just not working. So let's go fire up our anti-gravity really quick. Oh, I'm not signed in. Okay, I am signed in. And you know what? Let's do something. It's not going to let me add a new conversation. I guess I already am in a new conversation. So I'm curious about something here, right? Let's do this. Let's just grab this error message and actually, can I copy? Yeah, let's copy this message. Let's go to anti-gravity. Let's say I'm getting the following error. Can you help me figure out where it is? And the reason I'm using the LLM to do this is I'm curious if the LLM can figure it out. I think I know where the issue is, but I want to see if the LLM can figure it out. This has been a great stream. Thanks for the dialogue with us. I have a headache, so I'm going to head out. Have a good one. Hey, thank you for joining, Michael. I appreciate the feedback. I always worry a little bit because I don't know how many people are here for the advice and how many people are here for the code. I really appreciate the feedback. And if you guys have feedback, definitely feel free to share. But yeah, Michael, take care of your headache. I get that. Hopefully things get better. So let's see what it found. I found the issue. Look at line 53 and 76 in Dynos CRUD store. Great, let's look at those. Yes, it did find the issue. So line 53 and 76 in Dyno Source, you're calling inject Dyno CRUD service inside the operation callback of RX mutation. 100%. And this is where I knew the issue was going to be, was somewhere here. So we can see here, we're injecting this inside of the callback. Well, that callback is outside of the, it's outside of the injector. So yeah, it even brings this up. The TS operation callback runs lazily when the mutation is triggered, not during the store construction. 100% correct. So inject is called outside of an injection context, which causes the NG 0203 error. The fix, move the inject up to, yep. The problem, yep, is inside of the RX mutation, 100%. And so it made changes to the CRUD store. And this is what I really like about, sorry about that, my throat's getting a little bit dry. This is what I really like, and I didn't bring my water in. I don't know where my water is right now. But this is what I really like about this LLM, is that it took the time to change from, right, a direct object expression, it changed it to a function expression. It creates the CRUD service outside of the callback. It gives us a return, and it does the same here. Yeah, we're going to accept these changes. Those changes were exactly what we wanted, and it looks like we need to restart this to update. We got the everything compiles after that change. So let's refresh. And we're still getting no dinosaurs found. So let's figure out why we're still getting no dinosaurs found. Antigravity is back up. So here, the reactive method was called outside of an injection context with a signal or observable. So we do have an issue here with but for whatever reason, I don't think the network is being triggered here. So here's our graph request. No, we did request all dinosaurs. And our response brought back all the dinosaurs. So we got a Diplodocus and a Triceratops. I'm curious if we... No filters. Is something broken here? Let's just try serving this again. Sorry, I hope it's not because of reactive orbs. Oh man, that's enough to give me a headache. I'm just curious. We definitely broke something here. So we've got this. Our graph brought back 2 dinosaurs. We're loading a bunch of components here. We're loading some chunks. We've got some Zod stuff being loaded. So this is the only query that we're running, and it's bringing back 2 dinosaurs, but we're not rendering the 2 dinosaurs. So let's see. This fixed the injection error, but the data is not rendering in the table. Let's see what it can come up with here. We're probably going to have to do some debugging here, but I'm curious if it can find something and give us an idea of where to look. I see the issue. Look at the on init hook in the store. The effect reads sort direction that has feathers filter signals and then calls store.getTableDinos. But getTableDinos itself also reads those same signals inside its operation callback. In the old code, where inject was inside the TS operation, the operation function likely ran synchronously enough to work. Now the issue is more subtle. Actually, let me check something. Can you open the browser dev console and tell me, do you see the getTableDinos success response in the console log? Well, holy crap, Antigravity. First of all, way to go. So sort direction. So for question number 1, no, I don't see that message in the console log. I see a whole bunch of messages about the sort or has feathers changing. So that's answer to number 1. Do you see the sort direction or has feathers changing in the console? For question number 2, yes, there are multiple instances of that. That said, I suspect the real problem is that getTableDinos is being called from home component .ng after viewing it on line 50, and from the effect in the effect should handle loading. But let me check if the dino name field mapping might be the culprit. The table uses dinosaur.dino_name, and the response maps name to dino name. Actually, looking more carefully, the response in on success has a shape this, but the RX mutation might not be returning what we expect. Can you check your browser console for what gets logged at getTableDinos success response? That'll tell us that. So getTableDinos success response does not appear in the logs. So on success retrieves data versus how the old approach patched state. So it's already catching a bunch of stuff. And like, we would have to dig into this stuff. This is where I think LLMs and AI is hugely successful. It can go through the code, like it can search this code rapidly. For me to figure this out, would I have arrived at this information? Absolutely. It would have taken me way longer than it took the LLM to get there. The problem is an infinite loop. The effect calls the store.get table dynos, which via Rx mutation internals likely updates internal mutation state signals. The effect retracts those, fires again, calls get table dynos again, and the switch op cancels the previous in-flight request forever. Oh, the API call never completes. The fix is to wrap the mutation call in untracked, so the effect only tracks the two signals you explicitly read. Oh, dang. That's awesome. Let's see if this works. If this works, I'm going to be impressed. That should fix it. Here's what was happening. The effect tracks the store.sort direction and has feathers. It then calls store.getTableDynos, which internally via Rx mutation updates mutation status signals, loading, pending, etc. The effect was also tracking those internal mutation signals because the call happened inside the effect's tracking scope. When those internal signals changed, the effect reran calling getTableDynos again. Switch op canceled the previously in-flight HTTP request each time. Results in infinite loop. API call never completes. By wrapping store.getTableDynos in untracked, the effect only reacts to changes in sort direction and has feathers. Exactly what you intended. Now there's also a minor warning about underscore being unused. Yeah, that's a linting error. Give it a try. You should see now that the get table. So let's accept the changes here. So it's adding untracked. And then it is wrapping this in untracked for the store.get table dynos. So let's accept those changes. If you guys have questions about this, it gave us a good explanation of what's happening. And this is important because I'm not working in signals in the code as much as I used to. So having this work through it for me is impressive. So let's see what happens now. Look at that. I'm not sure I like effect. Yeah, I hear you there too. This might be a case where like a debounced effect. Like I haven't been a big fan of those in the past, but this might be a case where the debounced effect is useful. One thing we've got a problem with is our has feathers isn't working. Notice here that our no feathers and no filter is the same, whereas our has feathers is bringing back the T-Rex. No filters should be bringing back all dinosaurs. And that's a problem. Hey, Wild Woolly Llama, thank you for the follow. I appreciate that. Maybe resource or an HTTP resource in that case. I think we might want to move forward to that. I know we added a bunch of to-do stuff to do that in the future. Some of that stuff, maybe some of these refactors we can bring about after we get to the signal store stuff. But this is good to know. I've actually never used the untracked, but stopping the infinite loop here was awesome. So let's go back to anti-gravity, right? And let's tell anti-gravity, perfect, that worked. And we're using Claude Opus 4.6 thinking. But that worked. However, the unset filter for feathers, and I know the issue here. The issue here is that we stopped using the undefined. And because of that, now we've got a falsy value. And so that falsy value is not pulling back all dinosaurs. Instead, it's pulling back the dinosaurs that don't have feathers. But I want to see what anti-gravity and Claude can get for us here. So however, the unset filter for feathers is not bringing back all dinos. Instead, we're getting the ones without feathers. There's another piece to this that I want to take a look at, and that's writing the tests to make sure that this doesn't happen in the future. So found it, look at line 27 in the has feathers filter computed. If not state has feathers filters option, checking if the signal function is faulty. It never is. Oh, it caught me. State.has feathers filter option is a signal function. It's always truthy. So here we're checking the function. We aren't checking the value of the function. Without the parentheses, the condition is always false. So it falls through to the true. Just missing this. This is awesome, right? Like this is a bunch of refactoring, and just missing those parentheses was a big deal. Tracking that down probably would have taken a lot of debugging and debug messages. Having it do it for us is incredible. There we go. So the feathers filter, no feathers filter, no filter. Let's see if we can add a dino. We'll add a test. And this will be testicus feather us. The dino species is test feathers. The description is the coolest dino ever. It has feathers and fights velociraptors, and we'll even throw in some Yautja because it is so cool. The Yautja is thrown in there because I just watched Predator Badlands, and that was a fun. Let's quit Grammarly here. Because it is so cool. It definitely has feathers because we said it does. It even invented time travel and hid its existence from everyone but me. It is that cool, and I am so cool it didn't hide from me, right? Just so you guys know, this is the first time you've ever heard of this dinosaur, this is why. Height in meters, well, easily it's 400 meters high, and its weight, it's 6,000 tons, so 6 million kilograms, right? And let's go ahead and save this dinosaur. So there's our test dinosaur. This is the coolest dinosaur ever. With has feathers, it shows up. No feathers, it doesn't show up, but it shows up without the filter. That's some dinosaur. Exactly, wild woolly llama. It's an impressive dinosaur. The fact that it invented time travel and basically pulled an Occam's razor is pretty cool in and of itself. And that's why there's just no fossil record of it ever. But yeah, it's, I don't know. we're nearing the end of the stream. My brain is doing hilarious stuff. But that's the cool thing. And this is where, when people ask me about AI and LLMs, and sometimes from the way I talk, people might be like, "Oh yeah, he's anti AI, he's anti LLMs." Absolutely not, 100% not. What I am against is irresponsible use of AI and LLMs, right? If you provide good frameworks and if you provide good ways for the AI to succeed, we can see that in like 15, 20 minutes, we were able to solve a whole string of errors that in the past probably would have taken me an entire stream to solve. That makes me much more productive as an engineer. It also helps me understand the issues. To go along with like what Ole is saying, we probably should be using HTTP resources here. I was thinking about this after the last stream, and one of the reasons why using an HTTP resource is going to be a problem here is we rely on the data that we get back to do the forms. And so we need to fix the way the forms are handled, and then we can start using resources. And that's not a problem. It's just that the design right now doesn't allow us to use the resources. It's something that we should get into using. And we've got a framework that the LLM can be successful in. And that's where I think things really, really start to shine for LLMs. When they have a framework and there's a clear path to success, they're going to track things down much faster than me. Like the thing that really impresses me is here, where it's like, hey, do you see the get table dyno success response in the console log? That would be something that I would look for too, right? But it would take me much longer to get to this point. The other thing is like it recognizes where the inject was run and it properly refactored for me. These are all important places where I would get there, but it's able to get there faster than I would and make reasoning about the code because it's able to search the code much faster than me and keep a lot more code in its head, so to speak. I haven't had to take over the browser in Antigravity yet. I haven't had it asked to do that. But yeah. Hey, I'm back now. By the way, you don't need to say computed in with computed anymore. Really? So I don't. Let's get the AI on the case, right? I was informed that computed isn't needed in with computed anymore. Can you help me fix that? When did that change, Michael? Reactive forms do be giving me headaches. It could just be seeing this. Sure, in newer NGRX signals with computed automatically wraps the return values in computed for you. You just return plain arrow functions. Dude. Like, this just kind of helps. Here's why I like streaming, and here's why I really enjoy having the community that I do. You guys are in the code all day, every day. I'm not so much anymore. And you guys give me information that I haven't been able to keep up on. Thank you for this, Michael. Unless you need to do something fancy, version 20 or 21 made that change. Remaining lint, no, there's a previously existed this, but never used. I like that it, it just keeps like poking at me a little bit. Um, so let's go ahead and accept these changes. So that's a big, nice change. I like that a lot. And this is the benefit of, going back to the discussion we were having earlier, Ola. The NGRX team recognized that with computed was basically boilerplate, right? So they made a change. We get that change for free because we're using their library that they understood and made changes to. If we roll our own, we have to keep up with all of this stuff. The benefit that NGRX Signal Store has is they've got a giant community behind them. If they miss something, somebody's going to open a GitHub issue. Somebody's going to yell at them on Twitter. Somebody's going to yell at them on LinkedIn, right? They're going to get this information. Our company may not, because the code that we generate is not what's being consumed by our customers. The code that we generate is what creates the piece that our customers are consuming. And this is the big difference between a library and our own homegrown solutions, right? So thank you, Michael. But I also think this is just this change right here is a good argument for why. So let's go ahead and refresh and just make sure everything works as intended. What I do want to do is make sure that, one of the things that is we're only getting the sort direction once, so it was correct about the infinite loop. We've got this issue, which we can fix up. We've got this issue, which we don't, it's just warning us about hot module reloading. We're getting our success response. So there's some stuff we can clean up. I actually need to end. So let's go ahead. I want to address this issue, but I also want to make sure that we commit this. So here we made a whole bunch of changes, right? And we really cleaned up the store and fixed some bugs. So let's go ahead and just see what the LLM. Oh, I've hit my weekly limit. So cleaned up issues and fixed bugs. So there we go. One small change, and then I definitely need to end. Let's go ahead and grab Antigravity here. With regards to the lint error, I know there is a way to update the lint rule to make variables that start with underscore not trigger the error. How do I make that change? So again, it's telling me that there's an issue. I agree that there's an issue. I don't want this linting issue in the file anymore. Let's go take a look at that lint issue. Where is it? Here. Right. What I would typically do, if I'm not using an AI or an LLM to fix this, is I would look at the site, I would find the missing config that I've got, and I would add that. But I might miss some files or things like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask Claude, hey, can you help me with this? Because I want this issue to go away. We've got this issue in other files. Let me find the ESLint config to see what rule is triggering this. So it's got the no unused vars, and that ignores the no unused vars rule configured with beginning with underscore ignores the no unused, but the underscore is likely being caught because you also need vars ignore pattern to cover unused variables. However, looking more closely, this is a function parameter, so args ignore pattern should work. The catch is that if your project is using the TypeScript ESLint no unused, which plugin NX TypeScript likely enables, the base no unused vars config on line 45 won't apply to TypeScript files. TypeScript specific rule takes precedence and has its own defaults. You need to configure TypeScript no unused vars. So it made some changes. We can take a look at these changes here. So I thought I had configured no unused vars properly. We need the TypeScript one. The real rule is this one. I added two things. So it added this, the lint error this should clear the ESLint error. Okay, so let's go ahead and accept this. Let's just make a change here. No, it's still, let's try closing this and let's try reopening it. Dino's CRUD store. And it's still got the error. Don't get me wrong, I'm not against custom services, but looking at the code, I just don't see actual custom solution here. I'm not against custom services either. I use custom services all the time. So that didn't fix the issue. Let me check if there are project level ESLint configs, and there are. And that's the other problem. There are project level ESLint. So it's going to have to, and this is one of the things to be aware of that I wanted to call out is you have to make sure that you get all of the ESLint configs when you're using NX because each project doesn't have them. And yep, that fixed it. So there we go. That fixed our issue. So now our file is free of lint errors and we're good to go. So we're now in a state where we can start moving to signal forms. So yeah, I mean, it's not directly to you, just every idea makes sense, but reality is different. And that's the sign of a mature engineer. Because it's so easy as engineers to get bogged down in the academic and how we want the world to be. But that statement that you made, Ole, is very much the sign of a mature engineer, where you're like, I would love for it to be this way. I would love for this to work, but we have to recognize reality. And thank you. That's a great comment. All right, so we fixed our linting error. We fixed up our other bugs. So now we're ready to get into signal forms. I definitely need to end here. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you guys for the amazing discussion. I really loved your comments, and it was a lot of fun talking about the different issues that we discussed today. I'm looking forward to next Sunday, and just looking forward to refactoring a bunch of this. But yeah, you guys have a great week, and we'll see you next Sunday when we get back into more of this.